One thing you may have noticed about this list is the absence of any pronouncement on whether the Accord Coalition believes faith schools should exist or not. Quite simply, the organisation does not take a position on this issue. This is partly an issue of strategy, so that we do not isolate those on either side of this debate, and so that we are able to grow a broader coalition as possible. But it's also, as our current members are divided on this issue. For example, the Association of Teachers and Lecturers do not wish to prevent religious groups owning and running state-funded schools. In contrast, of course, the British Humanist Association resolutely do. However, I hope you will agree that if Accord's 5 key policies were implemented, they would help to address those aspects of state-funded schools which are most objectionable from a humanist perspective. Unfortunately, however, many proponents of faith schools still believe it is vital that these schools are able to keep their exemptions from equality and human rights law, and are able to continue to provide a narrow curriculum, particularly when educating their children about different beliefs and values. I would now like to move on and counter 8 of the most common defensive assertions that are put forward in defence of faith schools operating in such narrow and exclusive ways. The first defensive assertion that I wish to address is one that I often hear that goes something like this. Faith schools are more successful than non-faith schools, so why risk changing them? Well, firstly, not all faith schools are particularly successful. Some of them struggle, some cannot afford to be choosy about admissions, some end up at the bottom of league tables, some even end up with special measures. When schools struggle, society does not blame their religious foundation and ethos. We look for and find other reasons. And so it should be the same when they succeed. I'm sure that most people will admit that religious faith has little to do with academic success. So how have church schools in particular become the favourite choice for ambitious parents? There is good evidence that selection on the grounds of faith skew a school's social and ability profile, boosting its academic results and its position in league tables. This does make some church schools popular and oversubscribed, and so they become even more selective and they get even better results and attract the best teachers. In contrast, community schools do not enjoy the same control over which pupils they admit. Church and some other faith-based schools take fewer than average numbers of children from deprived backgrounds, and fewer than average numbers of children with special education needs. And more inclusive schools suffer when their neighbours adopt their own admissions policies. Defensive assertion 2 that I want to address. Only faith schools can teach about their own religion properly. It is true that some ordinary state schools could do more to respect the beliefs of some religious pupils. This needs to be tackled, but it won't be if too many of the religious are allowed to withdraw their children into separate schools. I will concede that religious schools generally conduct their own worship and instruct in their own religion more effectively than do ordinary state schools. But I seriously question whether this transmission of faith is a suitable object for public funds. I suggest that the broader religious education and more balanced and inclusive assemblies found in most community schools are more genuinely educational and appropriate for our diverse society. State-funded schools should be fostering the values that we all share and recognising that moral and spiritual values have many sources, not only religious ones. Out of the many schools of no religious character, to use the legal term, is Plachette School in East London. According to Ofsted, it is one of the 12 outstanding schools in the country and offers pupils from a wide range of backgrounds an outstanding ethos which values, and I quote, respect and respects everyone. It gets excellent Ofsted reports for social, moral, spiritual and cultural education, often held to be the particular strength of faith schools. Plachette School shows that schools that admit pupils from very diverse backgrounds can be equally strong. Defensive assertion 3. If we force faith schools to reform, they will leave the state sector where they will not be subject to the national curriculum. It is true that faith schools have to teach the national curriculum, but the subjects that should concern us most in faith schools, like religious education and sex and relationships education, are not part of the national curriculum. So whereas community schools have to teach RE that is genuinely broad and balanced, allowing for critical approaches and the growth of mutual understanding, faith schools can teach whatever they like in their RE lessons. There is no curriculum that they are obliged to follow. Ibrahim Lawson, the headmaster of the independent Islamia school, said on radio recently, and I quote, "The essential purpose of the Islamia school, as with all Islamic schools, is to incubate profound religious belief in children. If his school entered the state system, there would be nothing to make him change that approach." Assertion 4, defensive assertion 4, faith schools serve everyone. Well, actually, a great many only serve those who belong to faith groups that are well organised, that are geographically concentrated, and that either want to separate themselves from others or to convert others. They discriminate against everyone that is not of their religion, in their employment and admission policies, in their particular assumptions and ethos, and in their practices. Neither minority faith nor Christian schools serve diverse populations. And I believe that the Church of England's Way Ahead report, which was produced by the Church Schools Review Group and published back in 2001, signalled a new, more aggressive approach in many church schools that we are still seeing today. The report was critical of those schools that were not sufficiently Christian. It saw church schools as being on a mission aimed at securing the long-term well-being of the Church of England, with a duty to, and I quote the report directly here, nourish those of faith, encourage those of other faiths, challenge those who have no faith. Well, I have two comments to make on that. Firstly, is it the business of state-funded schools to challenge such beliefs of children and their families? And is it the job of state-funded schools to secure the future of a church, in this case the Church of England? State education, quite simply, should not be based on any kind of religious discrimination. Assertion 5. Having faith schools with different and distinct religious characters increases parental choice. Well, schools are not quite like buying sweets where my choice has no effect on yours, because there are plenty more sweets in the shop. As most head teachers and most parents know, choice in a finite context like education does not work like choice in a sweet shop. Families are often limited in the number of schools their children can realistically attend, and this is especially the case outside of densely populated areas. If a local school urges or advocates particular beliefs, then this may prove popular with some local families, but at the same time it would exclude others. Crucially, the best and most popular schools, whether faith-based or not, end up doing the choosing rather than families or parents.